Alice in Art Gallery. Nowadays, visiting art galleries is literally considered to give a giant source of satisfaction. Paintings drawn on the picturesque canvas definitely consist of their particular plots, surrounded by significance, art and the personal point of view an artist. Alice is a great admirer of art. She is literally obsessed with visiting galleries. There, Alice usually walks around watching the masterpieces. When the maiden likes the painting, she sits in front of it and stays in the building of the gallery for hours. Not long ago, a brand new gallery was opened. Of course, Alice had quickly decided to book a ticket for visiting it. The key, particularly of it, is the absence of the author's name near the paintings. Therefore, they are known. However, it is said that all the paintings have been drawn by the same author, the human who was suffering from schizophrenia. That's gonna be a peculiar visit, Alice thought. As it turned out, the gallery is suited in the huge Gothic building. At the top of it, there is a sculpture of gargoyle. Suffice it to mention that that day there were not an enormous number of people in the gallery, only a few visitors. As Alice considered to be a permanent visitor of such a place, this phenomenon seemed to be a bit strange for her. Apparently not many people are aware of such gallery. The inside doesn't seem to be creepy, as it was depicted in the minimalism style. Everything was built in the harmonic way. Alice entered the museum with a desire to watch every painting and find the one which seems to be the best from her point of view. Although, from time to time, the maiden had been distracted due to the scary voices which were heard near almost every painting. "Do you also hear that?" Alice asked one of the visitors. She didn't get an answer because the stranger started glancing at her as she was a crazy one. The maiden was slowly walking around, trying to find the most impressive and greatly interpreted picture. However, at first she couldn't do that because of that disturbing sound. Finally, Alice's attention was caught by a very interesting but rather strange picture based on the book Alice in Wonderland. It was really peculiar and even a bit scary. I guess no one would be jubilant to stay in that reality for long. In that picture, there were an enormous number of Cheshire cats, Mad Hatters, Dormoises, and all of the heroes of the story. Those clowns were really ugly. It seemed that their souls were dark and even close to death. Everything looked false. Totally another facet of the story. In the middle of the painting, there were two queens, the white and the red ones. They were arguing. However, they didn't have any clones. Despite the fact that in the art gallery, it was not allowed to touch any painting, Alice couldn't resist that passion. She got closer to the frame and accurately raised her hand. Eventually, her fingers started bleeding, having no cause for it. Then it began to swell and grow. At that moment, the gallery's securities noted that the maiden was aspiring to touch the painting and ran out of the cabinet in order to stop her. In a minute, they were already very close to Alice. She started to panic and in a split second touched the painting with that bleeding finger. Suddenly her hand seems to be already on the other side of the picture. Alice made a step and fell down. Alice woke up due to the loud storm, which was rattling in the harmony with thunder. She was totally lonely on the giant ship somewhere in the ocean. When the maiden looked around, she noticed that she was not considered to be in her daily reality. The ocean was literally red and seemed to be filled with blood. She touched the surface of the water and made sure of her assumption. The maiden got scared. She didn't understand what was happening. Suddenly, the loud water splash got heard. Alice saw a squid-like beast, so large that when any part of his body stuck out of the water, he resembled a floating island. Supposedly, this deadly, dreadful creature used its many tentacles to trap the masts of a ship and drag into the icy depth. And it was really so. In a split of a second, the self-controlled ship started rolling over, losing the equilibrium. Alice needed to make any decision that could save her at that moment. Finally decided to get the steering wheel. However, that giant creature was proceeding to ruin that ship. It started to create a deadly whirlpool just by submerging itself underwater. Alice slowly began to lose her hope and self-control. She understood that wouldn't crawl up to the steering wheel. Suddenly the ship was thrown up and Alice was thrown into the bloody ocean. At first, she was efficiently floating on the water. However, her forces started to disappear and she dived in the ocean. 3, 2, 1. Alice wakes up in being alive. Now she's in a totally different place. However, there is one thing which she eventually notices. Her legs do not reach the ground. It seems that she is flying above it. Or I am not alive, Elise assumes. Probably that is really so. The maiden is not alive either, and apparently her soul moves somewhere and she has turned into the ghost. Alice got up and looked around. Wonderland looked the other way around. It was very dark and gray. Probably something happened here. I need to find surely a Mad Hatter from this story. Walking around Wonderland seems to be a real horror. All the picturesque memories of her previous life were disappearing. While Alice was looking for a Mad Hatter, she faced an enormous amount of nonsense, a huge quantity of Cheshire cats which were upset, a lot of dormousες which were fearless, and a chock full of silly caterpillars. At last, she went to the kingdom of a Rat Queen. Suddenly, somebody grabbed her by the neck. She couldn't make any movement. When Alice saw the hands of the attacker, she recognized the Mad Hatter, who was a true friend of Alice from the book. In some seconds, she decided to say, "Hatter, I am Alice." And Mad Hatter let her move in order to see her. When Alice turned to a Mad Hatter, she freezed from fear. The creature didn't seem to be a real kind-hearted character that was depicted in the book. His eyes were filled with blood and angriness. It wasn't a real Mad Hatter. That moment Alice understood that it would be better if she didn't touch the painting. It was really crazy. In front of her eyes were an enormous number of foals. Mad Hatters. They were walking like zombies, aspiring to move more quickly. In their hands were a lot of very sharp swords. They were becoming closer and closer. Alice looked at her feet. They were becoming red. Sharp swords are piercing. Abruptly, the White Queen appeared in the circle of those zombies. She was standing in front of the maiden. "You have changed everything, Alice. If I even had an opportunity to save you, I couldn't do it all." "Why?" "Because from that moment you got here, the Wonderland turned into a real horror. You're not real Alice, but her clone. I would never say like that, but in order to save Wonderland, we should get rid of the cause of our horrors." The White Queen disappeared. Instead of her, there appeared as servants of the Red Queen and took Alice's heads off her shoulders. The maiden woke up in a mental institution. It turned out that one who was painting those pictures was Alice. In the museum with her paintings, which can transfer to visitors to another reality, was just an illusion of her crazy imagination.